Some small property owners in New York City are spending more than half of their rent collections on property taxes. And with new assessments, it's only going to get worse. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's actually going over the troubles of what rent control or rent stabilization, whatever they want to call it, cause onto landlords. Now, as you know, expenses, they increase every single year, be it utilities, maintenance, whatever, okay? But one of the biggest things that has increased in New York City is the property taxes. Now, a lot of buildings in New York City are falling under this rent control or rent stabilization, as they call it. However, they didn't seem to get that memo when they were assessing the buildings for property taxes. So every year, the city is charging these small property owners, large property owners alike, more and more money for property taxes, yet they're only allowing them to raise the rents so high. So that means that landlords are losing money every time they get their new tax assessments and their assessments increase. Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button if you haven't already. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of this sort of situation. Do you think it's fair that they have rent stabilization laws in place that won't allow you to raise rents more than a certain amount, but then they throw huge tax increases on landlords? Well, you already know what I think. I think it's a bunch of garbage, okay? I think that there shouldn't be rent control or rent stabilization at all. I think that the market should be the one who dictates how much rent is. I think that, especially in places where you're getting huge property tax increases, it is really, really hard on landlords and property owners. So, this article is coming from BrooklynEagle.com, and it says, New York City small property owners slammed by high onerous tax assessments. And it's an opinion article, but I read it and I agree with a lot of what the author is saying. So let's get into it. The New York City Department of Finance released initial property tax assessments this week, showing massive increases of the assessed value of multifamily buildings, despite significant revenue loss experienced by housing providers since 2020. Even when tax rates remain steady, increasing the assessed value of a building raises the overall property tax burden for the building. This is why housing providers in New York City have seen tax payments increase year over year, despite the tax rate remaining fairly steady. So, yeah, the tax rate is steady, but the value of the property supposedly has gone up, so they could charge the owners more property taxes. But keep in mind, for the last couple of years, there have been eviction moratoriums in place where landlords couldn't get rid of non-paying tenants, and they were getting completely screwed over and lost just a ton of money. So now, not only did landlords lose money because of the ridiculous state eviction moratorium and CDC eviction moratorium, but they get these higher property assessments on top of it, meaning their expenses increase, their income decreased, and they are now losing money. But to make things even worse, these rent stabilized buildings can only increase rent to a level that they allow up in New York City because they're the ones who control how much rent increases can be. And I don't know what it is. Maybe this article will go over how much these landlords can actually raise their rent to now. And I don't think it's a lot. I think it's pretty small, if anything. Assessment increases are particularly hard to absorb in rent-stabilized buildings where rents cannot be proportionally increased to offset the added cost. Pre-pandemic data suggests that the average rent-stabilized building was spending roughly 30% of rent collection on property taxes. Surveys of CHIP members in 2020 found that the number grew closer to 40%, with many small building owners reporting that more than half of their rent income was going to property taxes. If the state legislature passes good cause eviction, a form of court-controlled rent control, no property owner will be able to absorb these massive property tax increases, since the proposed legislation does not account for rising property taxes when setting a standard of reasonable rent increases. Yeah. So now we're going into the whole good cause eviction thing. So in under good cause eviction, the way that they are proposing it, a landlord cannot raise the rent when the tenant's lease comes to expire. So if a tenant agrees, let's say just real simple, to $1,000 a month, and then the landlord wants to increase the rent more than whatever they determine, like 3% or whatever. If the landlord wants to raise the rent more than 3% for the next lease term, then they can't do it, okay? Because that is against the rules of the good cause eviction. So yeah, basically it's a court controlled rent control program, and it's really interesting. So it really puts a burden onto landlords, and landlords are getting screwed every which way in New York. Only the really big landlords can figure out all of these different systems and figure out how to use them and make money. And what it's doing is it's scaring away the small landlords, the people like me who own just a couple of properties and just are trying to make a little extra income, maybe save up for retirement. So yeah, this is bad stuff here, and I really don't like it. If the state legislature passes good cause eviction, a form of I think I already read this. Early indications suggest that overall property tax payments will increase due to massive assessment increases. A building in Brownsville, Brooklyn reported an assessment increase of more than 40%. Another building on Sheridan Avenue in the Bronx reported an increase of 40.6%. A building in northern Manhattan reported a 25.9% increase. Dozens of other property owners report double-digit assessment hikes, which are historically rare and typically come with special circumstances to explain the increase. Raising property taxes does one of two things. It either raises rents or it leads to less investment in a building. If city elected officials want safe, clean, affordable housing, then they need to stop bleeding renters and their housing providers with outrageous property tax increases. And they definitely shouldn't make this worse by passing good cause eviction, said Jay Martin, executive director of the Community Housing Improvement Program. Yeah, and he's absolutely right. All of these rent controls, all these price controls on the rent basically are going to cause it so landlords, they're going to look for savings in other places, okay? And that means they're going to start neglecting maintenance and capital expenditures, okay? Doing the very bare minimum possible to get by. And we've already seen that as in New York, where you've got housing stock that is just dilapidated and people are living in it. It's livable, but the reason is because they have all these rent control policies in place. Now, I just read about the horrible, horrific fire that happened up in the Bronx where 19 people unfortunately lost their lives. And, I'm reading about this building and it was in a horrible shape. They said that it didn't have any sprinklers, it didn't have any fire escapes. And the maintenance on the building hadn't been done properly, and now they're looking at changing all these rules and laws so that they can make these buildings more safe. But here's the thing: in buildings like that, the landlords are doing the very bare minimum because that is all they can do in order to make a profit, okay? They're not going to go out of their way to make the building more safe unless they're absolutely forced to. And even in that case, if they can't raise the rents, they're going to try to skirt the law if they can, or, play over in the gray area of the law if they can. So, a lot of the problems with the housing stock up in New York are caused by all of the ridiculous regulations and laws and rules that they put in place, and it's unfortunate that maybe that led to these 19 people losing their lives up in the Bronx. And I hate to say stuff like that, but it looks to be the case, okay? Jacking up the property taxes for affordable apartment buildings in low-income neighborhoods is immoral. We need to be providing the people in these communities more help, not more costs that will lead to higher rents or worse housing. Mayor Eric Adams needs to clean up this mess that de Blasio left him, said Ann Korchak, president of the Small Property Owners of New York. Yeah, and I agree. Okay, stop jacking up these property taxes on these affordable housing. Stop jacking up the property taxes on these small landlords. Hell, stop jacking it up on the big landlords. Okay, jacking up the property taxes right now after 2020 and 2021, where landlords were just basically eating losses for 2 years straight. I mean, give me a break, okay? It's wrong thing to do, and landlords, we deserve better.